The project's called Converging Cultures, Hadrami Diaspora in the Indian Ocean. The Hadramis have been called the Jews of the Indian Ocean because they tend to be everywhere. They've moved out from their homeland in Hadrami, which is in southern Yemen, and they've sailed south along the coast of East Africa and east towards India and Indonesia. They've also recently moved north into the Gulf states, into Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, although they have a presence in the Hijaz in Saudi Arabia that dates back several centuries. So my project's involved with Hadramis in East Africa and also in the Gulf states. And I have a long history of working with Hadramis in East Africa. My field work, my doctoral research dates back to the late 90s and working on Hadramis in the Comoro Islands and more recently in Zanzibar. And I moved into the Gulf because I met a lot of people who had relationships with Hadramis in the Gulf states and who moved mainly for labor reasons to find work in the Gulf. And I hope to find convergences between the two communities. I did find convergences, but I found also divergences, which I have set up as a necessary prerequisite for convergences. The two communities are quite different because Hadramis in the East African states have married with local people. So in this case, mostly people of Swahili origin, and have constituted a fairly cosmopolitan, Creole, if you like, society, who are quite different from the Hadramis of the homeland. When they go back to the homeland, they often have difficulty speaking the language. A lot of them don't speak Arabic, but also with the customs and culture of the homeland. In Saudi Arabia, it's quite different. Most obviously, Hadramis in Saudi Arabia speak Arabic. So when they go back to the homeland, they don't have any trouble communicating. The cultural similarities too also make it easier for Hadramis to return to Hadramaut from Saudi Arabia and move in both directions. Okay, so I'm looking at questions of identity and constructions of notions of belonging within the diaspora. So what I'm interested in is links between people in different places in the diaspora, and particularly between East Africa and Saudi Arabia. I don't work with Hadramis in Indonesia or India. And also links that they maintain with the homelands. So how these 3 points of the triangle, if you like, East Africa, Hadramaut and Saudi Arabia, how the people in these different places interact with each other and construct a sense of belonging in these different places, and how they affirm or often or sometimes deny their sense of Hadrami identity. In East Africa, it's quite common to find people who describe themselves as Yemenis because Hadramaut is part of southern Yemen, which unified with North Yemen in 1990, so they're Yemeni citizens. Whereas in Saudi Arabia, there's a very clear differentiation between Hadramis and other Yemenis because of the closer historical context, because of the relationships, very specifically different relationships between Hadramaut and Saudi Arabia and between Yemen and Saudi Arabia. So in Saudi, I'm more interested in the way the communities differentiate themselves, the two Yemeni, if you like, or the Hadrami Yemeni communities, and also how Hadramis are quite involved in movements in Hadramaut, particularly recently independence movements in Hadramaut, how they affirm their sense of Hadrami identity. And this is also linked to their status in Saudi Arabia. Older Hadrami families in Saudi Arabia have Saudi citizenship, whereas more recent arrivals don't. And that includes some people whose fathers or grandfathers arrived in the 30s or 40s who never took out Saudi citizenship because they found it wasn't necessary. Now, of course, it is necessary and it's too late. So being singled out as, or being identified as not being Saudis, they affirm their Hadrami identity and reinforce links with the homeland. Coming from East Africa, my point of entry into Saudi Arabia was through contacts in East Africa, so people who had been to Saudi and lived there and worked there. And I went to Saudi expecting to find quite close links between different or members of the different types of Hadrami communities. There are and there aren't. I found that Hadramis from East Africa managed to find work often with Saudis of Hadrami origin, but there was very little in the way of social contact. It really was a formal relationship and based on the links that, tribal links, family links that went back to Hadramaut. Some of the Hadramis build quite extensive networks in Saudi Arabia, and particularly the ones that have come from East Africa who have links with the Saudi Hadrami families and act as facilitators, if you like. So others who come from East Africa use these individuals who've been there for a while as points of contact and then establish their own relationships with other Saudis of Hadrami origin. A couple of people I've been looking at who are quite interesting are members of the very wealthy Hadrami families. Now, one, Sheikh Abdullah Bukshan, is one of the wealthiest men in Saudi Arabia, and he became very interested in Hadramaut. He's always been interested in Hadramaut, became very involved in Hadramaut after the Saudi-Yemeni border treaty was signed in 2000. Started investing in Hadramaut, and now takes people back to Hadramaut. He has a private jet that he fills with people and flies back to Hadramaut on a fairly regular basis. Some of these people are people who've been before. Some are young Saudi-born Hadramis who've never been there. And I find the whole range of reactions to these visits, from people who say, one young man who said it was very interesting, but rather a dirty place, and he didn't really want to go back again, to others who say this is their homeland and they can feel their identity flowing through their genes as they land in Hadramaut and kiss the soil and this sort of thing. So a whole extreme range of expressions of identity. But in many cases there is an affirmation of Hadrami identity that's vehicled through this man, Abdullah Bukshan's activities, where he's almost constituting a diaspora himself. Being wealthy often helps in this sort of thing, that he can fly people every month or so, or every couple of months to Hadramaut. But it's interesting that the way this is happening. And another event was the production of a documentary on Saudi television, which came out about 5 years ago, which sung the praises of the Hadrami diaspora across the Indian Ocean. And this is repeatedly cited to me as something that I should see, but also something that has really been quite important in coalescing a sense of Hadrami identity in Saudi Arabia. The fact that Hadramis have contributed quite widely to particularly religious identity in the Indian Ocean, but also commercially. Very wealthy, successful Hadrami families in Southeast Asia and in East Africa generally give the diaspora a sense of well-being and authenticity and a sense of pride as well.